Discover the incredible moment a bank manager slaps a hidden black CEO, a life-changing revelation. James stood behind his wooden desk, wearing his signature warm smile as he helped yet another family secure a loan for their first home. In the small town of Maplewood, this wasn't just a job, it was his passion. He loved knowing that he was part of their journey, helping to shape their American dream, even if his own felt just out of reach. With each approval, he envisioned a brighter future for his children, free from the cycle of financial struggle that had gripped his family for generations, but as the sun set, casting long shadows across the town square, an unsettling energy filled the bank. Rumors of economic inequality were buzzing, and whispers of unfulfilled dreams hung thick in the air. As kids played on the sidewalk outside and laughter erupted from nearby cafes, James felt a weight on his shoulders. The wealthy client, Mr. Sinclair, with his relentless demands, loomed over him like a dark cloud. He wanted favors that rattled James's principles, and the pressure to comply for the sake of his family's stability gnawed at his conscience. Just then, Victor entered. Dressed casually in a simple hoodie and jeans, he walked with a quiet confidence that turned heads. The atmosphere shifted, almost crackling with an energy James couldn't place. Unbeknownst to him, Victor was a successful CEO, but he hid this beneath layers of humility. James mistook him for yet another struggling client, and his heart swelled with a desire to help. "Can I assist you?" James asked, ready to extend his hand to this stranger. Victor nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "Actually, I'm just here to see how you're running things." Behind Victor's calm exterior, there was a storm hidden. Misunderstanding crept into James's mind, spiraling into frustration from the pressures of Mr. Sinclair and his demands. When a conversation turned tense, the culmination of emotions seemed to explode. In a misguided moment, blinded by anger and misunderstanding, James slapped Victor across the face. Gasps filled the room, and an awkward silence hung like fog. The shock mirrored in Victor's eyes as James felt his heart race, panic replacing anger. What had he done? Why did you do that? Victor's voice cut through the stillness, disbelief hanging in the air like an unresolved chord. Feeling the shame spreading through him, James stammered, I thought what? That you could just judge me because I look different." Victor, still reeling, faced the harsh reality that no matter his success, prejudice lurked everywhere. The moment was a catalyst. As they stood there, two men from different worlds, James began to peel back layers of misunderstanding about privilege and societal expectations. Their conversation became a mirror reflecting their lives, the struggles each had faced yet never truly acknowledged in one another. "Before we continue," James said, desperation creeping in, "I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. As the tension sprang to life, words became weapons. James felt the weight of his actions as he confronted his own biases, while Victor wrestled with a mix of shock and empathy. Both were trapped in lives defined by expectations, and their confrontation was pushing them toward a reckoning. Here, beneath the gentle hum of everyday life, a journey was igniting. Would it bridge their worlds or tear them apart? Unresolved, the air between them thickened, leaving the town, and James, at the brink of transformation. James' heart raced as he felt the shockwaves of his impulsive action. The room buzzed with tension, eyes darting between him and Victor, awaiting the next move. For a fleeting second, he felt invincible, wrapped in the fire of anger, but just as fast, guilt crashed over him like a cold wave. He had crossed a line, and the reality of that hit harder than any reprimand ever could. Victor rubbed his cheek, still frozen in confusion. "You don't even know me," he said quietly, his voice tinged with hurt. "How could you act like that without understanding who I am?" "I am sorry," James stuttered, the apology tumbling out in a rush. "I shouldn't have what? Assumed? Judged?" It's easy to walk away from a mistake, but what about all the others that led to this moment? The judgment you didn't know you were carrying. Every word struck James with the force of a fist. He stepped back, eyes wide, as shame pooled in his stomach. What had his life become? It was easier to keep up appearances, to ignore the unsettling whispers of his conscience. After all, this was his job: help others, play nice, and keep everything from unraveling. Yet here he was, standing on the precipice of a different kind of truth. Victor exhaled deeply. Look, I get pressure. But pressure shouldn't distort who we are or how we treat others. Every single conversation matters. Every interaction can change a life. You're a bank manager, yes, but that doesn't mean you can let your biases blind you. The words settled in the silence, heavy and unyielding. In that moment, the realization hit James like a thunderclap. It wasn't just about this interaction. His choices, the compromises he had made, they all spiraled into this instance of harm. Those decisions had crept into his bones, changing how he viewed the world and those around him. I've been caught in a cycle, James finally confessed, shaking his head. My father, he always told me to be practical. But is this practical? Is it fair? I never meant to mean to hurt me. I know, Victor interrupted, his voice softening. But it's bigger than us. The roles we play, the systems we uphold. If you want to break that cycle, you need to take a hard look at what's driving you. It starts right here. He pointed between them, igniting a spark of connection. James swallowed hard, a flutter of hope intermingling with his fear. I want to understand, he murmured, a plea wrapped in sincerity. I don't want to be the man I was. What can I do? Victor smiled faintly, a flicker of warmth in his eyes. Let's start by redefining what success means. You help families secure loans, right? Help them build their dreams. Well, let's dig deeper. Team up with me, and let's create a workshop for people in this community who are struggling to get ahead. It's what you do best: share knowledge. The idea hung in the air like a promise, brimming with potential. A partnership between two men, both desperate to understand and be understood, could spark a movement within their small town. What started as confrontation could transform into collaboration. But an unanswered question lingered, like a melody waiting for completion. Would James be brave enough to step beyond his fears? Would he risk his career to stand against the very norms that had held others down? James could feel the weight of the moment press around him, and he knew he was at a crossroads that could change everything. What would he choose? James's breath hitched as Victor's words settled deep within him. Could he really take that step? Could he redefine success, not just for himself, but for an entire community? The idea of collaboration felt like a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters. Are you serious? James asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Workshops? For people like you? Victor's brow furrowed, but he maintained his composure. People like me? You mean just people, James? We're all trying to make our way in this world. Sometimes we just need a little help to get over the bumps. As James engaged with the thought of leading workshops, questions flared in his mind. What would his colleagues think? Would they see him differently? His position on the bank's ladder had always been about keeping the status quo, but now, he was staring at a possibility that could unravel the rigid threads of that existence. I don't want to screw this up, he admitted, the vulnerability in his tone cutting through the tension. Then don't. Start small. Even being honest in your interactions, showing genuine interest in people's stories, that's a big deal, Victor replied, voice careful yet firm. You've got a chance to not only help but to learn. And trust me, that's a two-way street. James nodded, feeling the heaviness in his heart begin to lift, replaced by a tiny flicker of hope. This was more than just work, it was a chance to connect, to understand repercussions, and maybe even to heal. Yet even in the midst of this budding aspiration, a nagging doubt crept into his mind. But what if it's too late? I mean, What if I step out and everything just falls apart? Victor stepped closer, the shadows of their previous confrontation fading. Perhaps what you're really afraid of is not failing, but truly seeing how deep the problem runs. We all have biases, but acknowledging them is how we start to break free. The words reverberated in James's chest. It wasn't just about the potential fallouts, it was about facing the reality of how he let situations dictate his perception without considering their roots. What if we do this, Victor? He whispered, almost to himself. What if we really try? Victor's face lit up, a genuine smile breaking across his features. Then we'll fight together to change the narrative. I'll be there with you, and it'll matter. It all matters. The sincerity of that connection, forged from pain and revelation, felt almost surreal. James had spent years tiptoeing around difficult conversations, fearing the confrontation that came from engaging deeply. But this was real. Suddenly, a young woman at the back of the room piped up, breaking the spell. Are you serious about a workshop? Because I've been struggling to get a loan, and I could really use some guidance. James turned to face her, the gravity of the moment kaleidoscoping before him. People were listening. They were eager. It was no longer just a conversation between him and Victor, it was an opening to a larger awakening. Absolutely, James replied, his heart beating faster, confidence surging within him. Let us create something together that can help all of us. As discussion swelled around him, an unfamiliar rush of excitement filled the air. Ideas started fusing, voices blending, forming a tapestry of hope and action. He realized this was not just about financial workshops, it was about building a community that dared to dream together, that allowed space for conversations that had long been swept under the rug, yet still, unease tugged at him, whispering about the repercussions of stepping outside his comfort zone. Would the higher-ups approve? Would he face backlash for shifting the direction of his career? Something inside him knew that the answers would reveal themselves as they moved forward. There's no going back now, James thought, excitement battling with fear. But as he stepped deeper into this new path, he felt the undeniable truth emerge. Sometimes, it takes a single act of courage to start a wave of change. Would he have the strength to ride it when it crashed? The crowd began to disperse. Laughter mixing with new ideas and budding resolutions. James couldn't help but smile, feeling lighter than he had in a long time. Yet still, he found himself lingering at the threshold of his decision, heart thundering at the crossroads. What would he discover about himself next? James's heart raced as the room emptied, leaving behind echoes of enthusiasm and potential. Victor had stepped away to chat with others, but the gravity of what just happened pressed in on him. A blend of excitement and fear vied for dominance in his chest. This was it, this was the moment he had been holding his breath for, yet it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. He considered the young woman who had spoken up, her face alight with hope and determination. Her eagerness to learn, to change her path, sent a sharpened sense of purpose through him. With every conversation he had stirred, every person he had connected with, a new world of possibility unfolded. Still, doubts wormed their way back into his mind. He glanced at Victor, animatedly discussing plans with a couple of attendees. What if he failed? What if his colleagues mocked him for his naive ambitions? The mere thought made his palms sweat. No, he muttered under his breath, trying to push the negativity aside. This was bigger than him. It was about lifting others, bridging gaps, creating a real impact. A moment of clarity struck him like lightning. He flipped open his phone and typed a quick message to Victor. Let us set a date for our first workshop. Let us start the conversation. He hesitated, finger hovering over the send button, thoughts racing through ways it could go wrong. But in that stillness, he remembered the weight of every word spoken that day, the lives that could be touched, the dreams that could be awakened. With a deep breath, he pressed send. Are you ready for this? He whispered to himself. Almost instantly, Victor's smile lit up his phone screen. Absolutely. Exciting times ahead. Let us make it happen. The joy that flooded him felt almost foreign. It was mixed with an exhilarating adrenaline rush. He was finally stepping into his true calling. As the weeks unfolded, James found himself consumed by thoughts of the workshops. He carved out time to prepare, reaching out to local experts, gathering materials, and lining up a space. Every small step drew him further away from his previous life, the cold, corporate structure that had once felt so safe. He began to feel like an agent of change, but as momentum built, so did the whispers of uncertainty. The higher-ups were beginning to ask questions. James received emails inquiring about productivity, the shifts in focus, the time spent on outreach programs instead of real work. One afternoon, as he sat in his office, the tension felt palpable. He could almost sense judgment lingering in the air. He clenched his jaw, reminding himself of the purpose behind his choices and the positive changes brewing beneath the surface. Then came the email that would set the wheels in motion, an invite from the board for a meeting to discuss James's recent actions. Anxiety spiked within him. This was it. Would they see him as someone committed to transformation, or would they see a rogue employee threatening their carefully laid plans? He spent the night tossing and turning, reliving every conversation, every good intention. Finally, resigned but determined, he decided he would show them who he had become, someone not just willing to advocate for change, but eager to ignite it. As he walked into the boardroom, James's heart pounded. The faces staring back at him were the same ones that had shaped his career. What would he say? How could he frame his vision of community, collaboration, and hope? With every step, he felt a mixture of fear and conviction pooling inside him. Would they understand? Would they see the vision he had for not just himself, but for so many others? As he took a deep breath and prepared to speak, he glanced once more at Victor, who nodded encouragingly from the back of the room. And that's when it hit him. Sometimes, all it takes is one voice to change the tide. But would that voice be strong enough to weather the storm ahead? The moment of silence hung in the air like a fragile bubble, ready to burst. James opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was suddenly acutely aware of his surroundings, the polished table gleaming beneath the fluorescent lights, the stiff body language of his colleagues, and the slight tap of fingers on a smartphone. They were not just faces, they were players in a game he was eager to change. He cleared his throat, breaking the stillness with a shaky sound. Thank you all for gathering today. I know I've stirred some feelings with my recent focus on outreach and community workshops. Immediately, a wave of discomfort washed over him. Eyes shifted, and the unspoken judgment felt almost tangible. Yet, the thought of the young woman, the one who sparked his journey, pushed him forward. He steadied himself and continued. I truly believe we have an opportunity here to make a real impact, not only on our immediate community but on ourselves as well. The murmurs began like a distant storm, an undercurrent of skepticism. One board member, a heavy-set man with a stern expression, leaned forward. James, this isn't exactly the direction we envisioned for your role. We value productivity over community building. His tone dripped with disdain, and James fought the urge to shrink back. He felt trapped, caught between the world he wanted to create and the one that had become his cage. But a flicker of determination ignited within him. What if building a strong community is part of what makes us productive? Engaging with people outside these walls isn't just about charity, it's about collaboration, innovation, and connection. The table fell silent again, and James plowed ahead, encouraged by the fire inside him. Transformation doesn't start with a program, it starts with us recognizing our role in shaping lives. I've witnessed firsthand the hunger for change and the impact a single conversation can have. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught Victor's approving nod, a lifeline during the tempest swirling around him. What results can you guarantee? Another board member challenged, crossing her arms, her steel blue gaze piercing through him. James hesitated, searching for an answer that felt adequate. I can't promise numbers, but I can promise connections that last. What I can promise is that if we invest in people, they will rise and so will we. He saw hesitance flicker in their eyes, a collective moment of introspection. But then, a younger woman amid the seniority spoke up. What you're proposing, it could take time. But can you tell us why it matters to you? Her question cut through him. He paused as the weight of those words settled. Because I've been where many feel trapped and unheard, he said, vulnerability overtaking him. I've sat in meetings just like this, feeling like I didn't belong. But I realized that struggle can fuel change. If one action can uplift even a few, then it's worth the push. He saw smiles start to crease some faces, the hesitation slowly fading. But just as the energy shifted, the older man with the stern expression spoke again, his voice hardening. Your idealism is commendable, James, but it doesn't align with our bottom line. We have shareholders to answer to. The air turned thick, and doubt crept in like an unwelcome visitor. James's heart sank at the potential rejection. Yet, he felt that young woman's energy, vibrant and real, urging him to stand tall. He responded with newfound strength, then maybe it's time we redefine what that bottom line means. Let us recalibrate success to include societal impact. It won't happen overnight, but it must start somewhere. The tension was electric. Would they turn away a voice calling for change? Would they bury their heads in corporate norms, or could they embrace this challenging but possible new path? James held his breath as he waited for their response, feeling every heartbeat resonate in the charged atmosphere, but before anyone could speak, the boardroom door swung open, and in walked someone unexpected, a former employee he had never expected to see again. A feeling of dread washed over him as the newcomer locked eyes with him. What did this mean? Would the history that had been left behind now alter everything he was trying to build? The unexpected arrival jolted James from his thoughts. The former employee stood at the entrance, his presence an unsettling current in the already charged atmosphere. It was Jake, a name that stirred a mixture of emotions in James' fond memories tangled with sadness. Jake had been an integral part of the team before he left under difficult circumstances. His sudden reappearance felt like a plot twist in a story still being written. James, Jake said, his voice steady yet laced with unresolved tension. Can I speak? The board members exchanged curious glances, their eyes flicking between James and this unexpected visitor. They must have wondered what could be so important. The air was thick with anticipation as James nodded slowly, urging Jake to proceed. Thanks, Jake responded, taking a step forward, his hands tucked into his pockets. I didn't mean to interrupt. But I couldn't let you speak alone today, especially after what I just heard. James felt a twinge of anxiety. Was this going to derail everything he'd been working for? What do you mean? Jake hesitated, glancing at the board members before locking eyes with James again. I wanted to talk about the vision you're laying out. I'm here, in part, because I believe in it. But I've also seen the other side. The condescending attitudes, the dismissive comments. I lived it. A low murmur swept through the room. James's heart raced. He wanted to rally the board, not stir up old wounds. People want to be seen and heard, Jake continued, his voice rising with courage. But change doesn't happen without risk. I left because I felt trapped, but until I stood up for what I believed, I was just another cog in the machine. We cannot forget that real impact starts with authenticity. James felt a flicker of hope igniting again. Jake's words resonated like a drumbeat, loud and clear, urging everyone to listen. You're right, he said, feeling emboldened by Jake's support. That's exactly why we need to shift our focus. It's not just about profits, it's about people. The stern board member, irritation flashing across his face, leaned in, clearly annoyed at the interruption. And what makes you think we should pivot to this idealistic approach? Because idealism can be pragmatic, Jake answered firmly. Look at industries that transformed by investing in their communities. Those who listen, adapt, and grow create sustainable success. James felt the tension around the table crackle with new energy. He hoped this was a pivotal moment, a turning of the tide. There was a chance, maybe more than a chance, that they could either champion this cause together or risk becoming obsolete. A younger board member, previously quiet, finally spoke up. It's hard to argue with that. Our customers care about values, and we're missing that connection. She looked around the table, searching for agreement, and James could sense the shift. Was this the opening they needed? Before caution could stifle the budding momentum, Jake added, "Look, this isn't just about the company. It's about the future. Real leadership means paving the way for a more inclusive and impactful tomorrow. It's our responsibility." James's eyes burned with unshed tears. This was what he had fought for, this moment where voices mattered, where change was possible. Maybe it was working. Maybe together they could rewrite the narrative, but just when it felt like the tide was shifting, the door swung open again. This time, it was a group of distraught employees, their faces a mix of anxiety and determination. A stirring murmur filled the room, making James's stomach drop. What were they about to reveal? Was this unexpected interruption a blessing or a storm approaching to drown the progress they'd just made? The tension in the room intensified as the distraught employees stepped forward, their eyes scanning the boardroom like searchlights. James could see the desperation etched on their faces. This was not just an interruption, it felt like a tidal wave charging in to drown out the small flicker of hope that had just ignited. "Excuse us," one of them, a tall woman with disheveled hair, started before glancing at the board members. Her voice wavered but held a fierce determination. "We need to talk about the layoffs." James's heart sank. The weight of their fears pressed heavily on his chest. Layoffs, something he had fought against, something they all had fought against together. "What about them?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm, though he felt anything but. "We heard whispers. They're planning to downsize again," she continued, her voice trembling. "It feels like a decision is already made. We're in the dark here." The board members exchanged anxious looks. It was clear they had not anticipated this confrontation. The younger member who had supported James earlier shifted nervously, stealing glances at the board chair, who simply scowled at the interruption. "No one is asking how we feel anymore," a male employee chimed in, his anger simmering just below the surface. "We're still reeling from the last time." It felt like a betrayal. A murmur of agreement swept through the group. James's heart raced. Here they were, the very people who tried to shield each other from the storms, now standing together, exposing their raw emotions in front of the board. He had to intervene. "Everyone, please," James said, raising his hand slightly, trying to project calm. "I promise you that we are all on the same side here. We're trying to build something meaningful, something lasting. We can change this." Jake stood beside him, nodding in support, an ally in this moment of upheaval. "But we must understand how our decisions affect everyone. You have every right to voice your concerns," he said, his voice steady and grounding. The employees responded to Jake's words, visibly processing the seriousness of the discussion. James could sense something shifting within the group, as if a fragile wall was beginning to crack. "Look at us," one woman pleaded, "we've invested our time and loyalty. All we want is to embody the vision you're discussing. But if there are more layoffs, it means you're not aligning actions with intentions." James felt his heart pound harder. This was a painful truth. Their passions were fueled by a mutual stake in the company's success, and any decision made behind closed doors felt like a betrayal. He understood now that if they wanted to forge ahead, transparency was necessary. Suddenly, their board chair stood up, a look of displeasure hardening his features. "Let us not let the emotions direct this discussion. We need numbers, and we need strategy. But strategy without humanity is nothing." Jake shot back. "We are talking about people's lives here." James could feel the tension boiling to a critical moment. The employees were no longer just hopeful participants in a corporate vision, they were demanding that vision include them, each voice vital, each concern valid. Taking a deep breath, James stepped back into the fray. "I promise to bring this back to the executive team. We need to discuss our approach, not just in terms of profits, but also in how we care for our people. Your voices matter, and you deserve to be part of this conversation." As the murmurs of agreement surged among the employees, James caught a glance from Jake. There was a recognition and understanding that this was just the beginning. They were standing on the edge of something that could either uplift or destroy. Just as a flicker of hope settled over the room, James spotted a figure lingering in the back, a stranger, a woman whose expression was unreadable. Who was she? And what role did she play in the unfolding drama? The atmosphere shifted again, hinting that the real storm was still brewing, and secrets lay hidden just beyond reach. James's gaze shifted back to the stranger, her presence stirring an unsettling curiosity within him. She stood apart yet seemed to absorb every word spoken, every tremor of emotion reverberating in the room. Her eyes, dark and intense, flicked over to him, lingering for a heartbeat longer before returning to scan the gathering. Who was she? He tried to shake off the thought, but it persisted like a shadow, tugging at his attention. The tension in the room had shifted. Employees who had once been filled with dread now bore expressions of cautious resolve. Each one was keenly aware of the stakes, their power in numbers becoming a palpable force. Yet that mysterious woman loomed like an omen in the background, an unseen variable that could tip everything they had just begun to fight for. "Let us take a step back," James urged, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "We're grappling with important issues here, and every single one of you is an integral part of what comes next. But we can only move forward if we have transparency." Suddenly, the stranger made a decisive move. She stepped into the light, breaking her silence with a calm yet commanding voice. "Excuse me," she said, her tone slicing through the murmur of the crowd. "I couldn't help but overhear." The room fell silent as everyone turned their attention to her. She had a magnetic presence that held their rapt attention, pulling the thread of uncertainty closely around them. "I know what it's like to be left in the dark," she continued, her eyes surveying the crowd as if searching for understanding. "I once worked in a similar environment, one where management made decisions without seeing the faces behind the numbers." James leaned in, intrigued. There was a passion in her voice that resonated deeply with the collective sentiment in the room. And it wasn't just about the layoffs. It was about feeling invisible. She paused, allowing her words to sink in. The employees exchanged glances, their faces reflecting a mix of confusion and intrigue. "Who are you?" a young woman in the front row finally asked, breaking the tension. The stranger smiled faintly. "I'm here to help," she replied, and James felt an unexpected rush of trust with those simple words. "My name is Maya, and I'm a consultant brought in to evaluate how this company engages with its employees during tumultuous times." A buzz of conversation erupted again, uncertainty mingling with a cautious sense of hope. James's mind raced. A consultant could either be a lifeline or an obstacle, depending on the intentions behind her appointment. He narrowed his focus on Maya, sensing that her presence could tilt the delicate balance they were desperately trying to maintain. "What can you tell us about the situation?" he asked, hoping to draw her out. Her gaze remained steady, and for a brief moment, she looked as if she was weighing her words carefully. "I can tell you that if voices are to be heard, they must first be given a safe space to be spoken. I've seen good companies fall apart in a moment of chaos simply because decisions were made in isolation." As she spoke, James noticed the demeanor of the board chair shifting. His arms crossed tightly, and his expression hinted at annoyance, but James seized the opportunity. "Exactly. That isolation is what breeds fear," he declared, casting a determined look toward the board members. "And fear has no place in this organization anymore." A chorus of agreement rippled among the employees. They seemed emboldened, standing a little taller and more united as they rallied around James, energized by Maya's presence and words. Just as hope began to bloom, the door at the far end of the boardroom swung open dramatically. A familiar figure entered, but this time he was not alone. As a wave of whispers filled the room, James's heart dropped. The newcomer was none other than Mr. Thompson, the CEO, looking more furious than ever. What had he seen? What did this mean for their growing momentum? As Mr. Thompson's eyes scanned the crowd, James held his breath, wondering if this was a moment of reckoning or despair. The tension crackled, and he knew this was about to explode in unexpected directions. What would the CEO do next? Would he shatter their fragile unity, or would he dare to listen? James's stomach churned as Mr. Thompson's gaze settled heavily on him. The CEO's presence came like a thunderstorm after sunshine, darkening the atmosphere with a palpable dread. He was a man accustomed to control, and right now, he looked ready to reclaim it, regardless of the newfound voice resonating in the room. "Quite a gathering we have here," Mr. Thompson began, his voice dripping with disdain. "I hope we're not wasting time on meaningless discussions." The boardroom crackled with unspoken tension. Cheers of hope, born from Maya's words, wilted under the weight of his authority. James felt the air grow thick as the employees visibly shrank back, their newfound resolve faltering. "Maya isn't here to waste anyone's time," he replied, forcing strength into his voice. "She's here to help us see clearly amidst the confusion. Isn't that what we all want? Help?" Thompson's scoff echoed, cutting through the quiet like a jagged edge. "What do you know about how to run this company or the industry? And who invited you here?" He directed his gaze toward Maya, who stood composed, absorbing the hostility with an unwavering center. "I was invited to bring clarity," Maya answered, stepping forward. "You know as well as I do that decisions made without understanding human capital only lead to unnecessary losses. People are not just numbers on a spreadsheet." Mr. Thompson's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing at her boldness. "Numbers, Miss Maya, are what keep this business running. You might recall that." Suddenly, James felt the weight of the moment. And yet this business is made of people. It thrives on their talent and morale. His voice was firm now, no longer just a plea but a challenge thrown boldly into the ring. "You don't understand that, do you? That dismissing their voices leads to a toxic environment. You're out of touch." A lower murmur swept through the employees, hesitant murmurs began to swell like a wave, rising in reluctant solidarity with James. Faces that had been fearful moments ago now showed determination, echoing his sentiments with renewed zeal. "How dare you speak to me like that in front of my staff?" Thompson's eyes flashed with anger, but for the first time, there was a hint of uncertainty flickering behind his fierce facade. "It's time you listen," Maya urged, her gaze directly locking with the CEO's, unnervingly calm. "Ignoring the truth won't erase it." As if a spark flicked a switch, the room crackled with possibility. James saw the shift in the crowd. They were no longer just employees gathered to hear the CEO's edict, they were a community that had the power to make a change, but Thompson was still dangerous, a storm yet to fully break. "You think your little power play will change anything here?" He spat back, but his voice trembled slightly. "I think it's a start," James countered swiftly, his heart thumping wildly in his chest. Energized whispers reverberated around him, each one fragile yet filled with that much-desired sense of agency. Mr. Thompson looked around the room, perhaps seeing faces he had once thought were mere minions now they were seats of influence, hope, and perhaps even rebellion. His expression twisted from furious to incredulous, and for an agonizing moment, it felt like the walls of power might crack. "Enough." He seethed, but there was a hesitation in his tone, vulnerability seeping through the cracks of his bluster. The room held its breath. Would this defiance break the spell of his tyranny, or would it incite a darkness they couldn't hope to escape? In that decisive moment, James witnessed the complex interplay of fear and courage that lay between aspiration and authority. Yet, dread loomed, they were on the edge of a tipping point. "What comes next?" he whispered nervously to Maya, unsure whether the words should carry hope or anxiety. As they awaited Thompson's response, an unsettling uncertainty hung in the balance. How much longer could they push? And, crucially, would the CEO break under pressure or bend to the voices he had tried to silence? The boardroom stood frozen, a charged silence gripping everyone as the CEO's bravado unraveled like a fragile thread. James could feel the electricity in the air. This was it, the moment of reckoning. Would the tide turn, or would the old guard close ranks? Mr. Thompson surveyed the room, his expression fluctuating between indignation and confusion. James, heart racing, knew that speaking up was just the beginning. It would take more than just bold words, it required a fearless commitment to change. "I'm not playing games here," Thompson finally spat, his voice sharper than a whip. "You all want to play into these emotions. Good luck getting any results." But as he spoke, he gradually took in the determination etched on the faces of the employees. It wasn't defiance he saw, it was unity. There was a flicker of recognition, as if he was starting to realize that his grip on power was loosening. "You know what this company really needs?" Maya interjected, her voice steady. "A willingness to listen. Real collaboration, not just empty platitudes about nurturing a culture. If we are to move forward together, it must start with you, Mr. Thompson." James felt a surge of pride as her words crystallized the path forward. No one was backing down now. It was a mosaic of courage against the dusty patterns of corporate hierarchy. The room had transitioned from tension to urgency, and James raised his voice, "Look, it's not just about numbers anymore. It's about the people who drive those numbers. And we need to start asking how we can help them thrive. That's what will ultimately lift us all." Thompson shifted, irritation etching deeper lines on his forehead. But another board member chimed in, "And if we ignore that, we risk losing talent. That could hurt our bottom line more than any layoffs ever could." A ripple of agreement flowed through the room, gliding over remnants of tension like a bomb. Collective confidence was brewing, this act of rebellion started reshaping their narrative. Maya continued, "Every single person in this room has the power to redefine success. There's an abundance of ideas and innovations waiting to be unleashed if we're given the chance to make it happen." Her words charged the air like positive static, each syllable sparking a new sense of hope. "Do we have your support, Mr. Thompson?" James asked, feeling the heat of determination in his chest. "We're ready to create something meaningful together, but we need you to join us instead of fighting against the tide." Thompson gazed around the room, his gaze softening as he saw the flicker of enthusiasm reflected back at him. He stirred, uncertainty flashing across his features, then his voice steadied, "I'm not going to dismiss your thoughts. You're right. People should come first. But the focus ultimately will remain on productivity. If that doesn't happen, none of this will matter." Anxiety again crept into the air, but he was conceding ground. James felt emboldened, the truth pouring from him with unyielding energy. Productivity rises when people feel valued. That's what we're fighting for, the lifeblood of this company's future. A resounding, unified energy reverberated through the room, forcing those skeptical minds to wrestle with the obvious. The whisper of change gripped the air like sweet perfume, intoxicating yet stable. "Perhaps we can hold a roundtable with representatives from all teams to discuss this further," Maya suggested, a hint of excitement in her voice. "Let us bring in voices from every corner of this company, and the community too. Engage everyone to contribute." As James looked around, he saw disbelief mingled with hope sparkling in the employees' eyes. This idea wasn't just a proposal, it was a lifeline. Thompson nodded slowly. "Fine. Arrange it." The agreement hung like a welcome breeze in the charged atmosphere. James fought the urge to leap for joy at the sight of people glancing at each other, sensing that this moment could indeed be transformative. "Thank you," he said earnestly. "This is just the beginning." As the meeting began to dissolve, James felt victory wash over him like a warm tide. He caught Maya's eye and exchanged a smile that said more than words could capture. Together they had crafted a turning point in their story, and it felt monumental. The board members were beginning to leave, but the real victory lay among the employees, who whispered hopes and dreams amidst laughter and sunlight spilling through the windows like gold. James felt radiant. This was more than a newfound camaraderie. This was about shaping futures, about creating an authentic community, where everyone belonged. "Can you feel it?" Maya said, glancing at him as they walked towards the exit. "This is deeper than just work. It's about empowering voices." As they stepped into the sunlight, James nodded, the warmth igniting a spark of passion within him. It's time to keep pushing this forward. And as he turned back to look at those gathered, he felt a profound connection that wouldn't fade. This wasn't just their story anymore. It was theirs, woven together by shared hopes and the promise of a brighter future. It was their moment to shine. Now more than ever, it's crucial to support this channel and be part of this ongoing transformation. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss exclusive stories that inspire change. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, and make your voice count. Comment your thoughts and feelings about the ending below because your insights matter, and finally, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Don't wait not even one more second to show your support for a channel dedicated to change.